Hi, everyone. Welcome to Sit for Change. As always, Tammy here to bring you exciting conversations about making events more planet and people conscious. Today, I'm excited to introduce you all to Janice Cardinelli, who will be chatting with us today for the next two episodes about mental health and psychological safety. For the past 3 years, Janice has been focused on the event planner's next 3 years because she's been focused on mental health and how you can actually make this practicable approach to your everyday life. Welcome, Janice, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Tammy. I'm happy to be here.
So let's start off with a little bit of reflection. Where are you now after the last 3.5 years?
Oh boy, that's a loaded question.
Mhm.
Where am I now? Well, I'm a lot further than I was. And that just happens to be the case because of the repetitiveness and the consistency to which I not only post, but I've used my voice for change and changing the narrative.
Mhm.
So when I began, I didn't know what to expect, to be honest with you. It was a mission that I created that I wanted to, help others and support others on their mental health journeys, of which that became a big factor when 2020 was, everybody stopped working, especially in our industry. However, what has happened since is that I have educated myself on peer support, on emotional intelligence, on positive intelligence, and psychological safety. And I have found through a lot of conversations with experts, PhDs, people in our industry, respected leaders, that there is so much room for creating a space for human sustainability. The
Yeah.
biggest factor being trust and safety,
Mhm.
is how that is having a tremendous impact on people. So, where am I 3.5 years later? I've just been invited to the table to speak to the Events Industry Council because of an event that I did throughout the month of May, Mental Health Awareness Month, called 30 Days, 30 Voices.
Mhm.
So, that's where I am.
That's wonderful. Congratulations on getting, on the Events Industry Council's radar.
Thank
Um,
you.
you've mentioned human sustainability, and we obviously talk a lot about sustainability on our channel. And when people hear sustainability, they often think environmentalism and climate activism. And you and I both know that it also encompasses social sustainability, right? Which is why you mentioned human sustainability, which we're going to talk a lot about together. Um, so, Janice, can you shed some light on what human sustainability and social sustainability is, and what are your thoughts around that?
Well, for me, what human sustainability is about is inviting the next generation to be part of an industry that has been going on for eons. And what I've seen happen over the last 5 years is that a lot of talent has graduated and begun to work in our industry only to leave very quickly
Mhm.
because the environments that they're working in are very toxic.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that all of them are toxic by any bit, but there are a lot of people who are suffering with toxic leaders who have not adapted to the changes that need to happen now. And I believe that a lot of young people are questioning whether or not their choice of entering the industry is a good one or not
Yeah.
because they're hearing stories. But human sustainability also has a lot to do with trust and safety. There's
Hmm.
no question. And a lot of people don't feel that they can trust their leaders. And how am I able to say a lot of people? It's because 3.5 years of listening to people and pursuing change in terms of our curriculum has taught me so much, including our leaders who ghost any conversation that I've tried to have for 3.5 years.
Hmm.
And that ghosting is unprofessional, as well as what I believe is their fear
Hmm.
in a lack of understanding what mental health is in the workplace. So I don't blame them for their fear at all. I just feel that it's problem on both sides of the table that needs to be addressed.
Yeah. I definitely think I agree with you there, and I think there's a lot of hesitation around that conversation over the years. And so, diving a little bit deeper into that, you've mentioned, some things that you've seen about the younger generation coming in the last 5 years. Being that you're a seasoned events professional who's seen various sides of this industry, right? You've been both a planner and a supplier in various aspects of the roles and in this industry. Can you speak a little bit more about what you've seen as a trend around mental health in our industry over your experience, both good and bad?
Um, as far as the good goes, I do see a major shift
Hmm.
in a movement towards wellness. And I believe that everybody is on board with that.
Good.
Whether it be, more benefits towards therapy or more benefits towards, whatever, maybe education.
Hmm.
Um, However, the bad part about that is that it doesn't deal with the core of the problem. Wellness is important.
Hmm.
And to me, it's the gift you get once you've done the hard work, which is learning
Hmm.
and learning how to speak to people. And I always say this, recognizing a problem in the workplace and knowing how to respond to it. That has a lot to do with emotional intelligence,
Hmm.
because a lot of people will respond to people who may be going through a mental health challenge at work, and it may not be a diagnosed mental health challenge. It
Yeah.
could be just, the way that person's being treated, but
Yeah.
they can trigger something very serious in somebody
Hmm.
without even realizing that the words that they're using are triggering. And so when I think about it and I hear about it, basically what happens is a lot of people feel bullied or sabotaged at work.
Yeah.
And there is no, certainly not in the United States, there is no law against this.
Yeah.
It's not like the employee can fight back and have the labor board on their side.
Yeah.
And for that reason, there's also a movement having nothing to do with me, but I do follow it very, very, specifically, called End Workplace Abuse. And they're trying to
Hmm.
pass laws in each one of the 50 states. Maybe it's 51 now, depending on what you guys got more of lately. But they are trying to pass this law where people will have, a law against, for example, your employer calling you on the weekend or at night.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, that was part of what we were talking about with boundaries, right?
Hmm.
But that hasn't stopped people from doing it. They still
No.
do it.
Yeah.
There's an expectation often that clients have of the people who are providers. They'll
Hmm.
call them the vendors. And that expectation is what I learned during my 20 odd years in the event industry. And an example would have been, receiving a call on a Friday afternoon. I had 3 children, and getting an RFP that client wanted for a Monday morning. And of course, I succumbed and I did what they asked. And my family came in second,
Yeah.
and the
Yeah.
client came in first. And when I look back on it now, I wish I'd had the guts to speak up about it.
Hmm.
But during those days, I wanted the client so badly that I would do anything.
Yeah.
I wouldn't do that today. If I had a second chance and I were to go backwards, I definitely would not do
Hmm.
that. I would very graciously explain how I work.
Hmm.
So if that doesn't work well for the client, then we're not a match.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's as simple as that.
Hmm.
But that's me. That's
Yeah.
not everybody else.
Yeah. I definitely see and hear that, especially in the events industry, we work long hours for setup, right? And tear down. And not a lot of companies compensate for that time. And we work on weekends, we travel a lot, and we're away from our families a lot. So how can event planners integrate mental health advocacy into their work to create more of a socially sustainable industry, both for themselves and also their community and their industry while still meeting client expectations?
First of all, I think that within every organization, there has to be some form of policy and procedure.
Yep.
When people came back from COVID, as an example, and they're still coming back because there are a lot of organizations now that want people in the office,
Hmm.
what should have happened at that point was a conversation between the clients and you as the vendor.
Hmm.
And it didn't happen because at that point, we could have spoken about flexibility, boundaries, expectations, pricing, what to be prepared for in the future, contractually. Like there was many, many, many things that should have been discussed but weren't. People were hungry to get back to work and hungry to serve the clients that they had left
Yep.
and gain new ones.
Hmm.
Instead of, painting the canvas so that both sides understood what they could align with. And had that been done, things would be a little bit different today.
Yeah.
So it's never too late to start.
Hmm.
And I think at the beginning of every year, it's an opportunity to, wish somebody well
Hmm.
and to talk about policies and procedures between you and that client. So, a lot of young people want flexibility. A lot of
Yeah.
elders don't.
Yeah.
A lot of people, would like to see a 4-day work week, and the leaders don't.
Yeah.
So there's that collision that happens between young people and elder people. And I can say that it also happened to me way back. When my daughter 10 years ago joined me, and I'll never forget after year one, she said to me, I spent 2 hours on the road just driving to and from work when I could be so much more, active. If I just stayed home, that 2 hours would be put to work.
Yeah.
And at first I kind of thought, yeah, she's trying to change my business, And then I thought, you know what? No, she's right. Maybe I should try it. And I did.
Yeah.
And I did it with everybody. And the thing about doing that is I got so much more out of everybody than I would have had I stayed with the way I thought, which
Yeah.
the way I thought simply came from my generation and also a hustle culture that still exists today.
Yeah.
So I look at my daughter and I see what kind of things play into her leadership
Hmm.
because she bought my business, and she is very grounded
Yeah.
in what's important in people. And I think this goes to a conversation that I always have. Until our industry starts prioritizing people over profit, we will continue to have this problem
Yeah.
because people matter.
Yeah.
And you need people to function and be there to help you with your business.
Hmm.
And frankly, when I hear stories, and I hear them all the time, and I challenge them when I do, people are complaining about the younger generation and the fact that, they come in for 3 weeks and leave. There's a
Yeah.
reason why that happens, and it's not their fault.
Yeah.
Okay. It has to do with leadership. It has to do with the lack of, coaching, teaching, and mentoring.
Hmm.
When you invite somebody into your business, what is your responsibility to that person? Are you just kind of throwing them into things or
Yeah.
throwing at them things
Yeah.
that you want done? So this is a conscious problem
Hmm.
that I see. And I can only blame them because you haven't created that environment for young people to want to stay in it. So I don't blame them for wanting to leave.
Yeah.
And quite honestly, I think that there are a lot of mismatched values in our industry.
Hmm.
And that's because of all the generations that are coinciding. So
Hmm.
I think when people get on board with thought leadership,
Yep.
it has to have this as a social impact.
Hmm.
The training, the way you speak to people. And emotional intelligence and psychological safety, which is what I'm all about, getting happening in our industry,
Yeah.
is not something you're born with.
Hmm.
It's something that has to be taught.
Yes.
You could be the nicest person in the whole world. That doesn't make you a good manager,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So it's I always say actions speak louder than words.
100%. Yeah. I definitely agree seeing the difference between having a manager and a boss, right? And also a manager and a leader, or a boss and a leader. And we always see on LinkedIn and social media that people don't lead jobs or companies, they lead teams and they leave managers and bosses. So I can see that being very relevant in that environment of promoting mental health. So segueing to this last question before we close out, and I think you kind of touched upon it, and I think you kind of answered it, but I'll ask anyway to see if there's anything that you want to expand on.
Okay.
Um, how can we foster social, sustainable workplace culture to help event planners balance the demands of creating innovative and sustainable event solutions while promoting long-term mental health, mental well-being and reducing burnout in such a high-pressure industry?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of answers to that question, but I think at the core, if we, if we do some training,
Mhm.
which there's training for everything in the world. I mean, there's marketing training, there's sales
Yeah.
training. I think that will help people to find a new language, find a new mindset.
Hmm.
I also think that taking people out of the, chaotic environment that they're in almost 365 days of the year,
Yeah.
that it does make a difference. You
Hmm.
can take your team out, go to a park, do something fun, like
Yeah.
just whatever, go bowling, go, painting art, you
Yeah.
know. So there are a lot of things that can be done. I mean, everybody can come here and help me with my garden. So
I love that. I would love that. I don't know how everyone else feels.
yeah, it doesn't matter what it is. It's
Yeah.
how you approach the
Hmm.
business that you're
Hmm.
in or have. There's a lot of solopreneurs now, way more than there were 10 years ago.
Yep.
And my prediction is there'll be a lot more at the end of this decade.
Yeah.
And why is that happening? I mean, A, it's a risk for
Yeah.
sure. But B, there's a conscious effort by that human being who has maybe not felt that they have been able to amplify what is important to them within that organization. So they decided that they don't want to be a part of that culture anymore, and they
Yep.
want to do their own thing.
Hmm.
So a lot of those people have already learned what's important to them because they've already seen the other side.
Hmm.
So again, I think it's up to us to, you know, welcome people in a different way into this
Hmm.
industry. I think that young people who are going through any of the courses that have anything to do with our industry, whether it be at a university, college, or within the industry, I think that there has to be a different approach. I think a
Hmm.
lot of what is being taught doesn't necessarily it doesn't necessarily need to be prioritized.
Hmm.
There are certain things that people have to learn about this industry,
Yes.
but there are other things that people need to be learning as the industry has changed. And that's where the pivot has been very difficult.
Yeah.
And that, in my opinion, comes from leadership that may be in the seat for too long, to be
Hmm.
very honest with you.
Yeah.
It was my time at 60 to get out. I didn't want to, but I did. And I moved over and I
Hmm.
started this. But the truth of the matter is, how effective would I be today, 65 years of age, and
Hmm.
talking to people about what's new in entertainment and all the rest of it? Like, it's it's time for my daughter who's 35. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's knowing when to step up and allow a younger person or to come in, but or taking that, if it's a smaller or mid-sized organization, bringing in some younger people and letting them train you on what's new and showing you how your business can adapt digitally
Yeah.
and with AI. And if the reports aren't wrong, if people
Hmm.
did that, they would find that their businesses would easily flow into the next decade.
Hmm.
But people are afraid. The elders are afraid. And besides which, anyways, there is going to be a whole generation of people that automatically retire.
Yep.
So there are going to be huge changes,
Hmm.
but even huge changes for young people with AI.
Yeah.
So that's my answer. It's up to it's all a mindset.
Yeah.
What do you want people to learn from you? What do you want your mission to be as a leader?
Hmm.
How do you want to impact the people who work under you?
Hmm.
Are you working together or are you working apart?
Yeah. Thank you so much for that. I definitely resonate a lot with that. And being part of a very large company, I do see a lot of people who are senior or have been in this industry for a while are resistant to change. And, the only constant is change, right? So that's something that we have to get accustomed to. But thank you so much for your insight, Janice. We'll wrap up part one here of our conversation. Those in our audience, if you loved this episode, don't forget to join us for the next one and we'll dive deeper into this conversation. And if you haven't already, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit that bell icon so you never miss out on our sustainability deep dives. Thank you again, Janice, for joining us today, and we'll see everyone next time. Until then, keep making conscious choices one sip at a time. Bye.
Bye bye.